I told her that my existence in this world was bound to her. That if she ever betrayed me and gave her heart to someone else, my anchor to this world would break, and I would be erased completely. Not dead. Simply gone, every trace, every memory wiped away as though I had never existed here at all. She believed it for 3 years. She held it close like a precious secret only the two of us shared. Then her Prince Charming came back. Standing in front of a crowd of laughing strangers, she wrapped her arm through his, looked at me with open contempt, and said, "Why haven't you disappeared yet?" The system voice rang clearly in my mind. World anchor loyalty dropped to 0. Anchor released. Host, initiate final transfer program. Countdown, 72 hours. Chapter 1. The candlelight dinner took me an entire afternoon to prepare. Beef Wellington, Serena's favorite, made with prime fillet shipped from Australia, cooked to a perfect medium, the inside still rosy and tender, the juices running freely when sliced. Beside it sat a small pot of black truffle sauce, a plate of French-baked escargots, and a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux she had always adored. At the center of the table stood a crystal vase of freshly cut garden roses, each bloom vivid and full, their rich fragrance filling every corner of the room. I untied my apron and checked the watch on my wrist, a piece I had bought on a quiet afternoon simply because Serena had once pointed at it in a magazine and said she liked it. The hour hand had already passed 8. She was an hour late. I sent her a message, "The food is getting cold. Are you still on your way?" No reply. I had grown used to it. Ever since Marcus had returned to the country 6 months ago, "I'm busy" and "running late" had become ordinary facts of our life together. I sat quietly at the table and watched the untouched candle burn itself down. The wax dripped and pulled at the base, hardening into something shapeless and ugly. The warmth left the steak. Its surface began to dry and tighten. I looked around the penthouse as I waited. It occupied the entire top floor of Crestview Towers, the tallest residential building in the city. Every room faced outward, and at night the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was nothing short of breathtaking. The city's skyline spread below like a living painting, the lights of a million lives flickering against the dark. I had bought it because Serena once said, on a drive home late at night, that she wished she could watch the city lights from somewhere high up, somewhere that felt like the whole world was below her. So I bought her the highest point in the city. The penthouse had 5 bedrooms, a private rooftop terrace, a temperature-controlled wine cellar that I had spent 2 years curating, bottles hunted down from estates across France, Italy, and Spain, and a kitchen that had been custom-built to restaurant specification because I cooked for her every morning before she woke. The interior had been designed by one of the country's most sought-after architects. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by hand. The antique oil painting on the living room wall, a piece worth tens of millions, had caught Serena's eye at an auction preview, and I had purchased it quietly the following week and had it hung before she came home. None of it had ever made her look at me the way she looked at Marcus. At 9:30, the door lock chimed. I stood up. The smile I had prepared died before it could form. Serena was back, but she had not come alone. Beside her stood a tall, powerfully built man in a perfectly tailored beige trench coat, his expression carrying the casual arrogance of someone who had never once doubted the world belonged to him. Marcus. Her university classmate. The Prince Charming she had kept buried in the deepest corner of her heart. And the greatest unexpected complication in what should have been a straightforward mission. Serena had her arm looped through his, her fingertips even tracing lightly across the back of his hand, a tenderness she had never once offered me. She noticed me standing there, noticed the dinner laid out across the table, and her eyes showed not a flicker of surprise. Only irritation. "Adrian, why are you still up?" Her tone was flat, the way one speaks to an unwelcome stranger. Marcus let his gaze sweep over me briefly before drifting toward the table. A slow, amused smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Quite the spread, Mr. Cole. Did you prepare all this for us as a midnight snack?" My eye settled on the hand Serena had looped through his arm. Something invisible closed around my chest, not sharp pain, just a heaviness that made it difficult to breathe properly. "Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary," I said, keeping my voice steady. Serena paused. Then impatience crossed her face like a shadow. "I forgot. Work has been overwhelming lately. Marcus just got back and I've been helping him manage the gallery too. I barely have time to breathe." She could not even be bothered with a more convincing excuse. The system had told me that as long as her affection and loyalty remained above 90 points for the full 5-year mission period, I could remain in this world permanently. The conquest had been completed at the end of year 3, affection at 95%, loyalty at 92%, both well above the required threshold. But permanent residency required the full 5 years to lock in. 2 more years, and I would have been anchored here forever. To protect those remaining 2 years, I had told her the truth, whispered it in her ear one night, holding her close in the dark. I don't actually belong to this world. My existence here is tied to you. If you betray me and fall in love with someone else, my anchor will break. I will be erased from this world completely. Back then she had laughed softly, pressed her face against my shoulder, and murmured, "How could I ever let you leave? We'll be together forever." 2 years short of forever. Adrian, Marcus said, stepping forward, his tone laced with deliberate contempt. I heard you told Serena that if she betrayed you, you'd disappear. He lifted Serena's hand between us like a trophy. So why are you still standing here? Shouldn't you have gone up in smoke by now? Laughter broke out behind him. I hadn't noticed the group lingering at the entrance. They stepped forward now, wearing the bright, hungry expressions of people who had come to watch a show. Marcus, don't, Serena said, hollow words, a reflex without conviction. She turned to me, and her eyes were cold with a disgust I had never seen before. Adrian, I have had enough. Her voice finally broke free of its restraint. Can you stop using these ridiculous lies to blackmail me emotionally? Disappearing? Anchors. There is no such thing in this world. You made it all up just to keep me trapped. Don't you think that's pathetic? Disgusting. She said it as though she were tearing through years of carefully maintained pretense, ripping it apart with both hands. You claimed you would disappear, yet you are the one who cannot leave me alone for a single hour. Your kind of love makes me suffocate. It makes me feel like I cannot breathe. Every word landed precisely, cutting into the places where I was most exposed. I looked at her, the beautiful face twisted with a revulsion I had never seen before. I looked at Marcus beside her, wearing the posture of a man who had already claimed his prize. I looked at the eyes around us, glittering with appetite for drama. I felt nothing in my chest. Only a quiet, hollow ringing. When the conquest mission had been completed, the system rewarded me with 50 billion in assets and a world-leading technology company called Nova Dynamics. I had handed the company to professional managers, stepped away from all daily ambition, and turned my full attention toward being the kind of husband she deserved. I cooked for her every morning. I learned which flowers she preferred in which season and had fresh arrangements delivered to the penthouse 3 times a week. I opened a Michelin 3-star restaurant, Velvet Table, and named it after the color of the tablecloths she had admired at a small bistro in Paris where we once ate on holiday. The restaurant did not accept public reservations. It existed solely for Serena and whomever she chose to invite. Because she had once said, without much thought, that she wished she could eat fine food whenever the mood struck her, and I wanted every mood of hers to be met. I also purchased a private villa on the coast 2 hours from the city, a white stone house with arched windows and a terrace that looked directly out over the sea, because she had once mentioned, in passing, that she had always dreamed of a place by the water. I arranged for the garden to be planted with the specific roses she loved, and I had the kitchen stocked and ready every time she wanted to escape the city. I arranged a standing reservation at the city's finest spa under her name, renewed her wardrobe each season through the personal stylist she preferred, and when she expressed interest in learning to paint, I had a private studio set up in one of the penthouse's spare rooms with every material she could need, a studio she visited exactly twice before losing interest. Everything I did for her, in her eyes, was nothing more than a method of control. A suffocating entanglement. The system spoke. Warning, World Anchor, Serena, loyalty at 0%. Anchor lock released. Legal residency expiring. Initiate final transfer program. Countdown, 72 hours. I took a slow, deep breath. The oppressive weight in my chest lifted, strangely and completely. I raised my head and met Serena's cold stare. The corner of my mouth curved into a smile she had never seen from me before, distant, indifferent, utterly calm. All right, I said quietly. Both Serena and Marcus froze. I will grant your wish. I looked at her and spoke each word clearly. As you want it, I will disappear. In my mind, I gave the system its command. Initiate the program. 72-hour countdown started. Phase 1, Asset Liquidation, initiated. Chapter 2. When Serena woke the following morning, the space beside her was cold and empty, with no trace of warmth. As though no one had slept there at all. Her head throbbed from the night's drinking. She sat up and noticed how unnervingly neat the master bedroom was. In the walk-in closet, the half that had always belonged to Adrian was completely bare, every suit, every shirt, every watch, every personal item gone. The space looked as though no one had ever lived there. A vague unease stirred in her stomach, but it was quickly swallowed by irritation. Throwing a tantrum and running off, she thought. How predictable. She reached for her phone and found an official notification from the Real Estate Transaction Center. Dear Miss Serena, the property at Crestview Towers Penthouse has been placed into emergency sale by Mr. Adrian Cole at 30% of its current market value, in accordance with Clause 17 of your prenuptial agreement, unilateral disposal rights of gifted assets. Serena's mind went completely blank. 30%. The penthouse was worth $300 million. Both their names were on the deed, but Adrian had paid for it in full, and there had been a clause in their prenuptial agreement that she had signed without reading, on a morning when she was running late and simply wanted the paperwork done. She called Adrian's number immediately. The number you have dialed is switched off. She messaged him on every platform she had for him. On each one, a small red icon appeared. You have been blocked by this user. A fear she had never felt before crept up slowly, cold and rising, like water around her feet. This was not Adrian's way. No matter how unreasonable she had been in their arguments before, he would at most go quiet for a day. The next morning he would always have breakfast waiting on the table, smiling at her as though nothing had happened. He had never switched off his phone. He had certainly never blocked her. She called her lawyer, Vincent, without even washing her face first. Vincent, Adrian is selling the penthouse. Stop him. There was a brief silence. When Vincent spoke, his voice was heavy. Miss Serena, I'm afraid there is very little I can do. The prenuptial agreement holds full legal force. His actions are entirely lawful. And at 30%, buyers will appear within hours. Once a contract is signed, it cannot be undone. Serena's hand trembled against the phone. She ran to the safe near the entryway and entered the combination. The door swung open, empty. Every property deed, every important document, every piece of jewelry she kept there was gone. Except one thing. A small velvet box sat alone in the center of the safe. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside lay the diamond ring, Forever's Edge, the one Adrian had used to propose. Beneath the ring was a single folded note, written in his bold, unhurried handwriting. A keepsake. 2 words. Not anger. A farewell, cold, deliberate, and composed. Not the act of a man who had lost his temper. The act of a man who had made a decision. Her phone rang again. Her closest friend's voice was tight with shock. Serena, Velvet Table has announced its closing permanently. The headline was stark and impossible to ignore. A culinary legend ends, Velvet Table, Michelin 3-star masterpiece, announces permanent closure. All staff to receive triple severance. Velvet Table. The restaurant Adrian had built because she once said, without much thought, that she wished she could eat fine food whenever the mood struck her. It had no public reservation system. It served only Serena and the guests she chose to bring. Its private dining rooms had been finished with hand-laid Italian marble, its wine list curated by a sommelier who flew in once a month, its kitchen staffed by chefs recruited from some of the finest restaurants in Europe. It had been the jewel of her social world. Countless women had flattered and schemed for years just for an invitation, to dine there once, to take a photograph inside those rooms, to be able to say they had been. Now it was gone. In the news footage, the restaurant's general manager bowed deeply before the camera. This was Mr. Cole's decision. He stated that the reason for which this restaurant was created no longer exists. Therefore, there is no reason to continue. The reason no longer exists. Serena's legs gave way. She sank to the floor. She remembered Marcus's contemptuous laughter the night before. She remembered her own voice, sharp and certain, disgusting. Panic flooded her in waves, each one higher than the last. Adrian had not been performing. He was not staging a scene to force her to beg. He was genuinely, methodically disappearing from her world, one piece at a time. Chapter 3. After the panic came rage, towering, defensive, and furious. Serena convinced herself that this was manipulation on a grand scale. That Adrian was using extreme measures to force her to crawl back. She called her closest friend and declared that she was perfectly fine and would not be moved. Then she called Marcus, let her voice go soft and fragile, and told him what had happened. So he sold it. Good riddance, Marcus said, easy and unbothered. A place soaked in that man's obsessive energy isn't worth keeping. This is a fresh start. My gallery opens next week, you'll stand beside me as the most admired woman in the room. What does some restaurant compare to that? His words worked on her the way they always did, smoothing out the sharp edges, quieting the worst of the noise inside her. She reminded herself who Marcus was. An artist. Free-spirited, romantic, unburdened by the heavy, suffocating routine that had always clung to Adrian. She changed into the white dress Marcus had always said suited her, fixed her makeup carefully, and settled in the living room to wait for him. The people who arrived were not Marcus. They were uniformed movers from Swift Move, carrying clipboards and hand trolleys. The foreman held up an electronic contract. Good afternoon, ma'am. We've been commissioned by Mr. Cole to clear the personal property from this unit. Serena jumped to her feet. This is my home. Get out. The foreman presented an authorization letter bearing Adrian's electronic signature without changing his expression. Mr. Cole has auctioned all furniture, artwork, and stored wine in this property, excluding your personal wardrobe, at 10% of their value. Our job is to clear everything by 5 o'clock and hand the unit to its new owner. 10%. The custom Italian leather sofa she had ordered from a showroom in Milan. The antique oil painting on the wall that was worth tens of millions. The wine cellar, 2 years of Adrian's careful hunting, bottles from estates that required personal connections just to access. All of it. Gone at 1/10 of its worth. Get out. All of you, get out. Serena lunged forward. A suited man stepped between her and the workers and held out a court injunction. Any obstruction will result in a lawsuit. You are prohibited from damaging any items within this unit prior to handover. She could only stand and watch as the workers moved through every room, systematic, unhurried, efficient. The sofa. The rugs. The paintings pulled from the walls. The wine racks emptied crate by crate. Every object that carried Adrian's fingerprints, every trace of the life they had shared, was wrapped up and wheeled out without ceremony. In the end, even the large bed they had slept in for 3 years was dismantled and carried out in pieces. By 4 in the afternoon, the 300-square-meter penthouse was hollow. Only the floor-to-ceiling windows remained, and beyond them the sky sat gray and indifferent over the city below. Serena stood in the middle of the emptied room. Beneath her feet were scuff marks left by the trolleys. Her few suitcases of personal clothing sat stacked in the corner like forgotten luggage. Only then did she understand. Adrian was not trying to force her back. He was erasing every record of his presence, methodically and without sentiment, one piece at a time. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Baby, I can't make it today. One of the gallery's investors pulled out and I need to chase replacements. Are you all right? Adrian hasn't caused more trouble, has he? Serena looked around the gutted shell of the room where she was standing. I'm fine, she heard herself say. When the call ended, she lowered herself slowly to the floor, knees drawn to her chest. There was only her own breathing and the low moan of the wind outside the glass. A loneliness so complete it felt physical pressed in from every direction. Chapter 4. Asset liquidation complete. Phase 2, social relationship severance, initiated. I sat in a standard budget hotel room and watched the last light fade from the window. My lawyer's messages came through steadily. Property transfer completed. As per your instructions, half the proceeds have been donated to a rural children's education fund under the name Serena. The remaining half has been transferred to your designated overseas account. All Velvet Table staff compensation and severance fully processed. Every employee received triple their annual salary. All Nova Dynamics shares transferred. Proceeds handled accordingly. In a single day I had gone from being one of the most powerful men in this city to an ordinary man with nothing to his name in this world. On the system panel, a long column of accumulated points scrolled continuously, points earned across 8 years of living here, building here, loving here. They would be more than enough for a comfortable life when I returned to where I came from. My heart was entirely still. I opened a hidden application on my phone, one that should not have still been functioning, but the system allowed it as a final courtesy. The live feed from the Crestview penthouse appeared on screen. Serena was curled in the corner of the empty living room, arms around her knees, looking like something very small that had been set down and forgotten. Without her careful makeup, without the sharpness she always carried like armor, she looked fragile. Exposed. I watched her without expression. The mission had required me to pursue her, to make myself everything she needed, and to win her completely over 5 years. I had crossed the conquest threshold at the end of year 3, affection at 95%, loyalty at 92%. 2 more years and the permanent residency lock would have sealed. I had been close. So close. I had believed, when the numbers climbed past 90, that I had earned something genuine. A real home. A real life. A real person who had chosen me back. Now I understood the truth. It had only ever been a transaction. I was the player. She was the target. The game had ended 2 years early, and it was time to leave the stage. I closed the feed and deleted the application. From this moment on, her grief and her relief were none of my concern. Severing all non-essential social connections. Contacts, accounts, identity information, being erased one by one. Estimated time, 48 hours. My phone acted on its own, removing contacts, logging out of every account, canceling every subscription and membership. One name after another vanished from my screen. One small accumulated piece of this life after another was stripped away. Finally, the screen went dark, the device reduced to an inert rectangle of glass and metal. The world became quiet in a way it never quite had before. The next morning, the new owner arrived politely at Serena's door and asked her to leave. She stood in front of the building with 2 suitcases on the pavement and stared at the street. Back to her parents, she had not spoken to them in 2 years. A hotel, she reached into her bag and understood, with a slow sickening clarity, that she had no cash and every credit card she owned had been cancelled. She called Marcus. He answered after a long wait, his voice impatient, the background noisy with music and conversation. Marcus, I have nowhere to go. The penthouse, I've been asked to leave. So find a hotel. I don't have any money. Silence. Then his tone sharpened. What do you mean no money? Surely you've got something coming from a divorce settlement. We're not divorced. All my accounts are cancelled. Another silence. Beneath it, she heard a woman's voice calling his name, light, flirtatious. Her chest dropped. Fine. I'll have my assistant bring you some cash. But things are difficult on my end with the gallery investors. Try to manage on your own for now. He hung up without waiting for her reply. An hour later, his assistant pressed an envelope into her hands on the street, his eyes carrying undisguised contempt. This is from Mr. Marcus. He says spend it carefully. He turned and left without another word. Inside, 50,000 in cash. Once, 50,000 would not have covered her most basic handbag. Now it was the sum total of everything she had. She took a taxi to Nova Dynamics headquarters. Adrian had occasionally dropped into the offices even though day-to-day management had always been in other hands. But when she walked through the glass doors and approached the reception desk, the attendant's smile did not waver. I'm sorry, ma'am. There is no Adrian Cole employed at this company. He founded it. The founder of Nova Dynamics is Mr. Sterling. The chairman is Mr. Whitmore. There has never been an Adrian Cole in any executive role here. Serena walked to the founder's wall. The photograph that had always shown Adrian, sharp-eyed, confident, at ease with his own power, was gone. In its place was a middle-aged man she had never seen. The name below the frame read, Sterling. She searched Adrian's name online. Every article, every interview, every industry profile that had ever connected him to the company had been scrubbed. Only sterling remained. As though Adrian had never built anything at all. As though an invisible hand had reached into every record and removed him completely. Chapter 5. Serena went everywhere they had ever been together, every restaurant, every arcade, every cinema. She asked anyone who might remember him. The results turned her cold. Mr. Cole. We have no record of that guest. I don't think I've ever seen him. Haven't you always come with Mr. Marcus? Everyone had forgotten Adrian. And even her own memory was beginning to resist her. She reached for specific moments, the warmth of his laugh, the particular way he had looked at her across a dinner table, and found them blurred, like scenes viewed through frosted glass. His back as he stood cooking. The gentleness in his expression when he turned to look at her. The solidity of his arms when he held her. These remained. But his face, his voice, dissolving, slowly and steadily, like ink in water. This frightened her in a way a simple separation never could have. He had told her once, in the soft early months of their marriage, exactly what this would mean, not death, but erasure. The complete, systematic removal of every proof he had ever existed in her world. She had laughed at it. Called it a ridiculous story invented by a man who wanted to control her. Now she knew it was real. And she, with her own cruelty, in front of a crowd of laughing strangers, had personally triggered it. The regret that moved through her was not a sudden crash. It was slow and thorough, the kind that settles into the bones. She used the $50,000 to rent a small room in a remote part of the city. She stopped returning Marcus's calls. She stopped reaching out to the friends who had stood in her entrance hall and laughed. Every day she sat in the cramped, slightly damp room and watched her wedding video on repeat. It was the only proof of Adrian that had not yet disappeared. In the footage, he stood before the officiant in a perfectly fitted suit, looking at her with eyes so open and devoted it made her chest ache to see them now. I, Adrian, take Serena to be my wife. In good times or bad, in wealth or hardship, in health or in sickness, I will love you and cherish you, until death parts us. His voice was steady. Each word certain and unhurried. Until death parts us. Death had not separated them. She had done it herself, deliberately, publicly, without a moment of hesitation. She slid the Forever's Edge ring onto her finger. The cold of the metal made her shiver. Then, slowly, something in her shifted. She was not ready to accept this. If Adrian had not yet fully vanished, if there was still time left in the countdown, then there was still a chance. She had to find him. She had to stand in front of him and say she was sorry. She had to beg him, if that was what it took, to stop. Chapter 6. Early the next morning, Serena bought a bus ticket to the city's outer industrial district. Adrian had mentioned it once, without much emphasis, a private studio he had kept since the earliest days of building his company. He had never let the lease go, even after the money came in and the company had grown into something enormous. It's where my original intention began, he used to say quietly, with a small smile she had never paid much attention to. She had never visited. It had always sounded depressing, remote, run-down, not worth her time. Now it was the only thread she had left. Inside the city's most exclusive private members club, Marcus stood with a wine glass and his most carefully calibrated smile, making his pitch to a heavy-set man in a cream-colored jacket named Mr. Hawthorne. My gallery concept is genuinely ahead of anything else in this market. With your backing, I guarantee this becomes the city's defining cultural landmark within 6 months. Mr. Hawthorne swirled his whiskey without bothering to look up. Then he set the glass down and fixed Marcus with a flat, direct look. I had someone look into your background, he said. Your overseas exhibitions, covered by a corporate sponsor whose name, interestingly, has since been scrubbed from every accessible record. The welcome back party that was thrown for you after you returned to this city, 7 figures spent in a single evening, drawn from a joint account that no longer appears to have a second holder. The startup capital for this gallery you've described as your own savings, traced to that same account. He leaned forward, his expression dropping all pretense of courtesy. I don't know who the second account holder was. By the time my investigators looked, the name was already gone, erased from every database, every document, every financial record that might have connected him to anything. But the money was real, Mr. Marcus. The transactions were real. And none of it was yours. He stood and looked down at Marcus without warmth. Let me be direct. You have been living off someone else's wealth and someone else's connections. Whoever that person was, he is gone now. And without him, so is everything you were pretending to be. He picked up his jacket and turned to leave. I don't fund illusions. The men who had crowded around Marcus only minutes earlier drifted away like smoke, their eyes carrying the sharp flicker of people recalibrating someone's worth downward very quickly. Marcus stood frozen, the wine glass trembling in his hand. Everything he had built his identity on, the talent, the overseas prestige, the sense of being someone worth pursuing, stripped bare in a single conversation and left on the floor. He hurled the glass down. It shattered against the polished marble. Eyes bloodshot, he reached for his phone and dialed Serena, needing someone to absorb the rage building in him with nowhere else to go. But what answered was a mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is currently engaged. What he did not know was that Serena was using her phone as a torch, working her way through an abandoned industrial zone toward a place she had never thought to visit before. Chapter 7. Serena searched the old industrial district for nearly 2 hours. Finally, at a rusted iron gate, she found the number plate she recognized from a photograph she had once glimpsed among Adrian's things and never thought to ask about. The lock had seized with age and disuse. She pressed her full weight against the gate just to force it open a narrow crack. The smell that came out was of sealed-away time, dust, old metal, and the faint chemical scent of circuitry. The studio was not large, but every surface was occupied. Electronic components in various stages of assembly. Hand-drawn blueprints pinned edge to edge across the walls. Mechanical models and half-finished devices she could not identify. Nothing here belonged to the world she had moved through for the past 3 years. Everything clashed with it violently. And yet, Adrian was everywhere in this room. On the workbench, a half-finished cup of coffee sat beside a small ceramic dish of extinguished cigarette ends. Every wall was covered in dense sketches, game architecture diagrams, logic flowcharts, technical annotations written in his distinctive, unhurried handwriting. In the corner, a retro game console stood half-assembled, its internal wiring still exposed and suspended mid-thought, waiting for hands that had not come back. Serena stepped inside carefully, the way one enters a place that deserves to be treated gently. She ran her fingers along the cold surface of the workbench and tried to imagine him here, alone, long past midnight, bent over this desk, building something from nothing in a city that had not yet heard his name. This was where Nova Dynamics had begun. Not in a glass-walled boardroom. Not in a building with his name on the door. Here, in this cramped, rust-gated space in a forgotten corner of the city, he had built the company that eventually became one of the most powerful technology firms in the country. The 50 billion. The penthouse. The restaurant. The coastal villa. The wine cellar. All of it had started here, in this room, with hands that had stayed up through every night so that she would never have to ask for anything. She had never known any of this. She had only ever known the wealth. She had never once asked where it came from or what it had cost. She had enjoyed every comfort he provided and quietly decided, somewhere along the way, that he was less than Marcus, less romantic, less interesting, less worthy of the way her heart moved. She had mistaken his steadiness for dullness and his devotion for control. How completely, bitterly ridiculous it all looked now. Inside the top drawer of the workbench, she found a black hardcover notebook. She opened it, and felt the blood drain slowly from her face. It was not a journal. Mission target, Serena. Mission type, emotional conquest. Duration, 5 years. Mission reward, permanent world residency. 50 billion in assets. Below that, page after page of precise records. Year 1, affection 32%. Weakness, vanity, craves attention and admiration. Strategy, grand romantic gestures, public displays of devotion. Year 2, affection 61%. Weakness, insecurity, desires exclusive loyalty. Strategy, consistent and meticulous care, gentle separation from damaging social patterns. Year 3, affection 95%. Loyalty 92%. Conquest threshold exceeded. Long-term residency protocol initiated. Residency lock confirmed upon 5-year completion. Current status, Year 3. Residency lock pending. 2 years remaining. Their meeting had been designed. Their falling in love had been calculated. Every time her heart had turned toward him, every moment she had been moved, every flutter she had felt, had been the result of a strategy mapped out in advance. She had never been his love. She had been his mission target. An NPC in a game she had never known she was playing. The fury of being deceived so completely, from the very first moment, made her want to tear the notebook apart. Her hands shook with it. But she did not close it. She turned to the very last page. World anchor, Serena, loyalty reduced to 0. Residency lock permanently invalidated. Initiating final transfer program. Countdown, 72 hours. The handwriting was even. Objective. Not a single word that carried the weight of feeling. Serena sat with it for a long moment. Something in her chest sealed itself shut. His departure was simply the automatic procedure following mission failure. She had been nothing more than a target. A number on a panel. She almost closed the notebook. Then her eye caught a single line at the very bottom of the page, written in a different hand. Less controlled. Slightly smudged at the edges, as though the pen had been held by someone who was not entirely steady when they wrote it. But what if the player falls in love with the game itself? Everything she had just accepted as final collapsed without warning. He was not heartless. He had fallen in love. The one designed to be the player, objective, calculated, untouched, had, somewhere in the middle of year 1 or year 2 or somewhere she could not locate precisely, become trapped in the very world he was meant to pass through without feeling. That was why he had told her the truth about the anchor, not as a strategy to hold her, but out of genuine, unscripted fear of losing her. That was why he had left the ring behind, not as a final cruelty, but as the last quiet act of someone leaving a piece of themselves with a person they cannot stop loving. That was why he had donated half the proceeds from the penthouse in her name, a small, silent way of still protecting her even while walking away. Serena bent over the workbench and cried until she had nothing left in her. What was worse than being deceived was knowing that the other person had given their heart fully and freely, and that she had been the one to crush it, in public, while laughing people watched. Chapter 8. Social relationship severance complete. Final stage, erasure of existence traces. Countdown, 10 o'clock. I sat on the hotel bed and watched the last sliver of sunset fold slowly into the horizon. 72 hours, almost gone. This world, which I had lived in for 8 years, was about to have nothing more to do with me. 8 years of building, striving, cooking breakfasts, hunting wine bottles, furnishing a home, watching a city from a penthouse window and thinking, quietly, privately, that I had finally found a place worth staying. I felt no attachment. No reluctance worth naming. Perhaps just a small amount, in the part of me that still carried the weight of a woman named Serena. The system had classified it as a program error. A redundancy in the data. An anomaly to be cleared. I knew better. It was my own choice. I chose to fall in love with her, and after she broke what we had, I chose to end everything cleanly with my own hands. There was nothing in that to regret. Countdown, 10:09:87. At that moment, the old backup phone left forgotten in my coat pocket, dead for days, battery long since emptied, began to vibrate. I took it out. The screen had come on without explanation. Not a call, not a message. A forcibly opened window, pushed through by a system it should no longer have been connected to. On the screen, the live surveillance feed from the old studio. Serena was collapsed across the workbench, crying in a way that looked as though it might come apart at the seams. In her hands she clutched my black notebook. She had found the place. She had seen that sentence. Something in my chest, which I had genuinely believed had gone still, had become as flat and quiet as water in a sealed container, struck a single, hard, unexpected beat. 3. I watched her lift her head. Her face was streaming and wrecked, filled with a despair so complete and total it had no room left for anything else. She opened her mouth. Silently, across the distance between us, she said my name. 2-1. Transfer program initiated. A burst of white light swallowed everything. Serena was barely breathing through her tears when the phone she had been using as a torch began to flicker. Every image on its screen vanished, replaced by a red countdown. 05. She went completely still. 04. She understood instantly what she was looking at. 03. No, the sound that came out of her tore through the silence of the studio. 01. She jerked upright and screamed with everything she had. Adrian. Adrian, come out. I was wrong, I was so wrong, I'm sorry, please. At the moment the countdown reached 0, the air at the center of the studio shifted. It rippled the way the surface of still water moves when something beneath it stirs. From within that disturbance, slowly and faintly, a figure emerged. Adrian. White shirt, dark trousers. Tall, composed, expression calm. His gaze passed straight through her, fixed on something beyond, some point she could not see. He could not see her. She was no longer part of where he was. Adrian, Serena threw herself forward and reached for his hand. Her fingers passed through him without resistance. He was like a reflection, present to the eye, absent to the touch. He no longer belonged to this world. Behind him, a gate of soft, warm light opened, quiet and completely final. He turned toward it. Without hesitation. Without looking back. Don't go. Serena dropped to her knees, her voice barely recognizable as her own. Please, please don't leave me here alone. The figure at the edge of the light paused. One fraction of a second, the space between deciding and doing. Then he stepped into the light. The gate closed. The studio returned to absolute silence. Serena remained alone on the dusty floor, the only living thing left in the room. The phone in her hand went dark. The last trace of Adrian Cole in this world was gone. Epilogue. 1 year later. In a neighborhood restaurant with ordinary tables and a worn laminate floor, a woman in a server's uniform moved efficiently between customers, clearing plates and resetting napkins. She had cut her hair short. She wore no makeup. Her face held a quietness shaped by time and consequence, rather than peace. It was Serena. After Adrian left, the debts Marcus had been quietly running up in corners she had never looked into came looking for her instead. She sold the Forever's Edge ring. She sold every remaining piece of jewelry that could be turned into money, and it was barely enough to start over. She did not go back to her parents. She did not contact the friends who had stood in her entrance hall that night and laughed. She took the most ordinary job she could find, rented the cheapest room available, and began learning, slowly, without grace, and without the option of giving up, what it meant to live entirely on her own. That evening, clearing the last table before closing, she found something beneath an empty plate. A generous cash tip. And beneath the tip, a folded paper napkin. On it, someone had drawn a small, lopsided smiley face in ballpoint pen. Clumsy. Simple. Childlike. Serena went completely still. She remembered a morning years ago, when she had been sick and refused to take her medicine. Adrian had drawn exactly this kind of smiley face on a sticky note and pressed it gently against the side of her cup. Take it. For me. Her heart seized. She crossed the restaurant floor in 4 quick steps and pushed through the front door into the night. The street stretched in both directions, busy with ordinary people living their ordinary evenings. No one who looked like Adrian. No trace of him anywhere at all. A coincidence. It had to be. She went back inside and picked up the napkin with the care one uses for something irreplaceable and fragile. She stood there for a long time, just holding it. Then she bowed her head. A single tear fell and spread across the face of the little drawing, blurring the ink gently at the edges. She knew, with the kind of clarity that only arrives when it is far too late to be useful, that she would carry the weight of what she had destroyed for the rest of her life. Not as punishment. Just as the shape of who she had become, and the outline of what she had lost. In a space with no sky and no floor, pure white, extending without boundary in every direction, a man stood before an enormous holographic screen. On the screen was a frozen image, Serena, in a server's uniform, standing over a table in a modest restaurant, a paper napkin held carefully in both hands, tears running silently down her face. A smooth, emotionless voice filled the space. Earthworld 73B, mission experience concluded. Overall evaluation, S+. Conquest threshold successfully exceeded in year 3. Decisive departure protocol activated following anchor betrayal. Performance standard, highest recorded. Note, Non-essential emotional linkage, classified as love, detected during mission. Data anomaly has been logged. Adrian stood with his hands loosely clasped behind his back, looking at the frozen image without any readable expression. Beside him floated a glass of faintly luminous blue liquid. He picked it up and took a slow sip. "That smiley face on the napkin," he said quietly. "Was that your doing?" Emotional projection models indicated this action would raise the target's regret index to its permanent maximum, contributing to an elevated final mission score. "I see," Adrian said. His tone gave nothing away. "Host Adrian, would you like to initiate the memory formatting procedure to clear the emotional anomaly generated during this mission?" He looked at the screen for a long moment. In the still frame, Serena stood alone in a modest restaurant, a napkin in her hands, her head bowed. The white space was completely silent. "No," he said. Finally. Quietly. "Leave it." Command confirmed. He turned away from the screen and did not look back. "Get everything ready," he said to the air. "Start the next mission." He walked forward into the white. Behind him, on the screen that he did not turn back to see, the frozen image of Serena remained, a woman standing alone, holding a piece of paper with a crooked little drawing on it, as though it were the last solid thing in the world.